Welcome back to Detailed, an original podcast by ARCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. Happy 2025, by the way. My guest today is Jooyeol Oh, Principal at MG2 Architects in their Seattle office. MG2 also has offices in Portland, Irvine, Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., New York, and Shanghai, China. Jooyeol is a visionary designer with over 20 years of experience developing thoughtful, community-centered environments. Each design he delivers adapts to the shifting lifestyle needs of evolving neighborhoods. Internationally recognized for award-winning buildings and master plans, Jooyeol instinctually crafts experiences founded on his clients' social, cultural, and programmatic values. He leads through active listening, building consensus among diverse opposing needs to ensure the opportunity each project presents becomes a reality. The project we will be talking about today is the Corners Lofts Project in Chicago. Located in Chicago's Portage Park, the historic Sears building at 4714 West Irving Park Road has undergone a remarkable transformation. Originally an Art Deco department store and warehouse that opened its doors in 1938, it closed just recently in 2018, marking the end of an era. However, thanks to the visionary efforts of MG2 in collaboration with Colliers Engineering Design and the client, Novak Construction, this iconic structure has been reborn as the Corners Lofts, a dynamic mixed-use development combining retail and residential spaces. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome back to Detailed. My guest today is Jooyeol Oh, Principal at MG2 Architects in their Seattle office, correct?
Yes, Seattle office.
Got that right. MG2 also has offices in Portland, which is where I'm at. I'm assuming that's Portland, Oregon.
Yes,
Yes,
Portland, Oregon.
Ask that question. Irvine, Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., New York, and Shanghai, China.
Yes.
The project, this is such a cool project. By the way, this is such a cool project. The project we're talking about today is the Corners Lofts Project in Chicago, another city I love. Jooyeol, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me to the interview. Really happy to be here.
Well, I am happy to have you, and I'm excited to talk about this project because that is quite the transformation. So we'll just get into it.
Sounds great.
So I always start with an icebreaker question, just, to get us both warmed up a little bit and also to get to know you a little bit. And as I was reading through all of your information, I did a little trolling on the internet as well. I go look everywhere. I noticed in your bio that you obtained a bachelor's degree in, listen up, listeners, in chemistry at Colgate University before obtaining a master's in architecture at MIT. I have a son who has a minor in chemistry and a major. I'm drawing a blank. Another science one. My brain went totally blank. Anyway, I understand what it takes to get that kind of degree, and those seems such a departure from one another. So tell me about that. How did you go from chemistry to architecture?
So it's a great question right off the bat. I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do, major in college. So I chose a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. And of course, the Colgate had a good reputation in terms of academic rigor and smaller class sizes. So I thought, well, that's going to give me opportunity to interact more with the professors who will recognize my face, my name. And although I enjoyed art classes in high school. I also had a strong interest in science. So I decided to just pursue both in college. And as time went on, I found myself more and more in art classes and in art building, uh, engage in conversations with art professors. And towards the end of junior year, and one of my professors suggested, or towards the end of sophomore year, I guess, one of my professors suggested to explore a career that combines both art and science. And a couple of them, he suggested one is architecture and the other is art preservation. Um, but still undecided, uncertain about my path. I graduated with the major in architecture, a major in chemistry, and minor in art. And after the graduation, I spent a year in doing a medical research on Alzheimer's disease. And it was during this time I kind of really come to realization that I'm really not gonna pursue a science path where I need to sit down in a lab environment a lengthy period of time. And so I began visiting like architecture and art engineering offices where I really found at that time the clarity in what my future, where I want to go. So um, ultimately, I then decided to apply to architecture school, and it was a bit of a circuitous path, but in the end, I believe I made the right choice.
Well, I think it's microbiology, by the way, in case my son listens to this episode and says, "Mom, how could you forget what I majored in?" My brain just went blank. I think it. I think a lot of times it's real easy to get pressured into going into a particular field because you're good at it. But just because you're good at it, I'm really good at accounting and I hate doing accounting. Absolutely detest it. Um, but I had a young son who was really artistic,
Hmm.
and he chose the other direction. He did not want to do a job related to his art because that was his escape from the world. That was his
Hmm.
thing that he did just for the pure joy of it. But I think if you have a talent that you really love doing and you can find a way to actually make money doing it,
Right.
then that's a win-win if you don't feel like you're giving something up. I imagine you have artistic endeavors outside of architecture.
I mean, I love sketching. I love painting, and my wife's also a sculpture major as well. So just interest in common, looking at art, architecture, our surroundings, and experience. That's what I love about what I do.
I can only imagine how cool the inside of your house is with both of you there. So let's talk about this project. I literally said wow when I read the description of this project. This is quite the transformation. I mean, it's really,
Hmm.
really notable. I would definitely say you leveled up in the adaptive reuse department. Can you start with a little history on this building?
Thank you. The building originally opened in 1938 as a Sears department store. And this Sears enjoyed a long history of a successful neighborhood shopping center. And the structure, the Art Deco style building with a concrete frame, has been vacant for about 6 years or so, ever since the Sears closed down in 2018. And when we first received the project brief, we immediately fell in love with the building's potential. And here's a bit of a history about Chicago, my history about Chicago. I visited Chicago many times since 2010 for various projects and client meetings, but never had a built project. Um, when this project opportunity came through, I thought finally a chance to have a built project in Chicago where it is a birthplace of a modern high rise and rich history and architectural history. And it was really exciting for me.
I can imagine. Chicago is a beautiful city.
It is. It is.
It's
Although,
I've only been there a couple times. It's a beautiful city.
hmm it's fantastic, except the winter time, which is could be bitterly cold.
Yeah, no, I my visits to Chicago have always been centered around better weather.
That's right.
I don't want to be anywhere near that part of the world in the wintertime. Do not like the cold. So when Novak Development, who we may also be having a little side supplemental interview with them,
Hmm.
when they decided they wanted to reimagine this 1938 Art Deco Sears department store, and I totally see the richness of the personality of this building. Um, and they wanted to turn this. I was really amazed. They wanted to turn it into a retail multifamily residential building.
Uh-huh.
Not as I'm reading, not what I expected to read. Did not think that's where it was going. What was their initial vision and goals for this building?
Um, the goal definitely was converting this building into residential mixed-use building. But also the primary goal also was of the client as well as the community, I'd say, was really preserving the character and history of the building, which I completely agreed. We as an organization also completely agreed. Six Corners has a really rich history as a vibrant community slash entertainment district, and maintaining its character was really key priority for us. The challenge, however, though, was that while the building had a historical Art Deco elements, it lacked windows. With the most of this facade uh, consists of solid walls, except for the corner, the display window corner at the Six Corners, and this presented both a limitation, but at the same time an opportunity to really reimagine the building into a residential mixed-use building, and we're really excited by it. And with its incredible bones and unique potential, we wanted to create a mixed-use building that really is can be both distinctive and appealing um, to the residents and neighbors. And the process definitely, of course, as opposed to designing a brand new building, ground up new building, it definitely is more challenging, but it made all the more rewarding for sure.
Well, you did it justice. One question I don't know why I didn't think to ask in my questions that I sent you was this did this fall under historic preservation requirements?
Um, it was not actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, that helps. I mean, that
that
can make a project take a lot longer
a lot
uh,
longer,
and be
definitely.
a lot more difficult.
Right. However, there was a demand from the community for sure.
Yeah.
And in order to get the approvals process through, you need the agreement or approvals from the community as well. So, whether you're explicitly required to do so or not, you had to do it regardless, in my opinion, in this particular case.
Well, kudos to you for that because it does have a rich personality, and I think it would have been a shame to completely lose that. It doesn't mean it made it easy. Any old building is not going to be easy. You did so much here in this building that it was a little difficult for me to decide where to start this conversation in more specific detail. So, can we just start with a broad description of what this building started as? You know, what did you have to work with, and what you ended up with?
So the primary objective of the project was to generate fresh ideas for converting the old iconic warehouse building into a competitive rental product that can command a high rental premium and offers a living experience that residents can enjoy. When we first examined the Sears building in January of 2021, I mentioned about how cold Chicago can be, but it was pretty cold in January of 2021. I was struck by the sturdiness of this structure, concrete structure, with the large spans supported by flared columns were designed to really bear the weight of the merchandise and people um, during its heyday. And although its original purpose had reached its end of its lifespan, the building still had so much potential to give back to the community. And the key challenge was figuring out how to transform a deep rectangular footprint that was suited for the department store um, into the desirable residential living space.
That was one of the things I thought of right away. It's like, how do you, they're just such different uses.
Hmm.
How do you get to the place where you turn that? A department store has very specific needs, which are absolutely the opposite of what you need in a place where people are going to live. So I was like, boy, they had some interesting things to tackle in this building to get
Hmm.
there. Let's get into a little more detail on the design. You did a lot to the exterior of this building, including punching out windows, adding balconies, adding an additional structure. Tell me about that more in detail. What did you design here? We know what we started with, so what did you do to it?
So first, we needed to address the floor plate issue. The deep rectangular department store layout was not really conducive to an easy conversion to residential use, although the ground floor retail was okay. Um, both the building's interior and exterior needed to be designed simultaneously. And while I'd say functionality of the floor plate is arguably the most important part of the design, the exterior design is equally critical to create a cohesive and complete vision. And getting that thing right um, is where you really often distinguish a great building, great design into something versus something that is just acceptable. And to address the challenge of the deep rectangular layout of this floor plate with the really limited windows, we reconfigured the floor plate to more residential friendly depth by carving it out to create a U-shaped building, and we removed a chunk of a floor plate on the north side. Um, this design really increased the perimeter that allowed a more natural light into the units, and also we added a floor on top of the existing structure, and also five-story new wing to the north of the building. Um, now, I know the theme of the podcast is detail, so I'll explain a bit more detail on how we interpreted and used Art Deco design language. Um, Key element of the Art Deco language is emphasis on the forms, whether it's a horizontal or linear forms, I meant, whether it's horizontal or vertical. And we celebrated this through vertically oriented floor to ceiling window openings and further tie in historical elements from the original Sears building. We incorporated a smaller window mountain subdivisions that mimics the glass blocks that it had in the certain part of the old building. And also the new wing featured the pillars that is made out of brick. Now, uh, we use the brick because the significance of brick that ties to the history of Chicago, which after the Great Chicago Fire in 1871, the city was rebuilt using mainly Chicago brick. So, and in addition to the vertical pattern that I just mentioned about the windows uh, and brick pillars, we wanted to express the applied decorative elements that is also very typical of Art Deco buildings. For example, a low relief sawtooth pattern that horizontal band between the ground and a second floor created a rectangular geometric pattern. Um, and this pattern we combined the triangulated corner formed by the six corner intersection itself uh, uh, into inspiration of the designing the balcony tieback attachment to the building. And so these are some of the key exterior design moves that for the project that we made.
Was it a challenge um, getting some of these applied art artistic pieces, or did you start with a new look on the old thing? I did one interview where they had to try to find the original molds
Hmm.
for some of the things on the outside. It was another pretty historic adaptive reuse project, and had to try because they were having a heck of a time finding anybody who could remake these pieces.
Hmm.
Did you start fresh with those?
It was relatively easier, I'd say, for us because it's a department store with a blank wall, and it was pretty solid structure. So, and finding these little elements of the glass block openings where the light has come through, it's translucent. It just gave a kind of natural design language inspiration to repeat to create in residential units openings. So I'd say it was easy to borrow the language and get inspired from the language, and it was but then the application of it, window openings, creating a new window openings and whatnot were relatively easier because it was all blank.
Well, that helps. It also just occurred to me, and I did a stint for a number of years in an MEP firm. What did the systems in the building look like when I mean, I'm assuming they got updated over the years if the store didn't close until 2018. Did you have to scrub everything and start over with plumbing and electrical and mechanical, or was there things you could still use?
There was nothing to really that we could reuse. Everything needed to be scrubbed. And when we visited the building in 2021, uh, it was pretty much removal of all these elements were in the process of getting it finished at the time. So we could just see the bare bones of the building.
Well, that helps to not have it in the way if you have to start all over, not have to work
Yes.
around that. So I don't have a of the pictures I do have, I don't have a picture of the inside of this particular area of the building, but I love that tall glass atrium in the corner. Um,
Hmm.
in my and I found this interesting in my experience with multifamily residential, which I've done quite a bit of over the years. The developer typically wants every last inch of rentable square footage, and that atrium goes up high, and I'm like, wow, okay. So I was a little surprised to see that. I don't want to say space being wasted because I don't see it as wasted space. I think it's gorgeous. I actually have a lot of respect for the developer and giving up that rentable, those extra inches to keep that. Tell me a little bit about that atrium, and what influenced them to keep that space as opposed to getting more rentable square feet.
So you're absolutely right. Most of the developers want every square inch uh, of developable area to design, and you don't want to lose any square inch. But this was a unique project, right? The historical element is there, and tall glass atrium was really key part of the original design. We all, including the client, um, agreed to preserve it. And it is the most actually recognizable feature of the old Sears building because everything else is a kind of a blank wall with some applied relief and some elements of the Art Deco design, but that was the most recognizable element. So from the beginning, we never really considered removing it. Um, while we could have redesigned the atrium to make it more striking or even over designing it. We felt that simpler, cleaner approach that pays tribute to the previous design was more appropriate than uh, creating something that is entirely new and much more ornate. Now, functionally, this corner of the ground floor was a slightly elevated than the rest, which posed a challenge. We added, if we added the slab there on the second floor, residential for the residential use, the ceiling height for the ground floor retail really wasn't going to be good. It actually would impair the function of the retail, uh, especially for the 50,000 square feet retail anchor. So preserving the atrium not only solved the problem, but also provided a fantastic branding opportunity for the retail space. And I might add the added benefit of this decision was the creation of the incredible patio on the fourth floor corner unit. The patio is a truly exceptional, where offers expansive views, a unique space for sunsets and activities, including gatherings and more. It really is a one of a kind feature that wouldn't exist if we really filled up that corner with the slabs. And quite frankly speaking, I believe the local community would not have supported the project, supported the design if we completely eliminated the corner and then filled with the slabs. So it was a smart and also calculated decision as well.
Oh, I knew conversations happened because I've just worked with too many developers, and I mean, they have a job to do, and their job is to rent space. But sometimes you actually end up, I think, doing better financially.
Right.
Really, like leaving that there, and like you said, this patio, this fourth floor patio, is that for all residents there, or is that a particular unit?
It's only for that particular unit, so it's much more unique. And whoever rents that space feels like it's a one of a kind space. Although the many units will feel like it's a one of a kind because each unit with the existing el- um, structures will create, did create a unique unit types.
Well, I imagine that brings a pretty penny in Chicago. So let's go inside the building. Let's Before we get into maybe specifics of certain areas, let's start with a broad description of some of this different types of spaces. And we all know multifamily has requirements for a number of different spaces. So, what are
Yeah.
some of the different spaces included on both the ground floor retail and then in the residential portion as well?
Okay, so I'll just, walk you through the building. So there is a
Okay.
big chunk of the floor plate that is on the ground floor that is slated for the large anchor retail that is Target today. Um, However, they're not really there's a no direct connection, a sacred connection, let's say, from the residential lobby to the Target store, because you want some sort of security, right? A security management of where people are going in and out from a retailer's point of view. But they're next to each other, meaning the lobby and the Target store. And as you enter the main lobby, you're greeted by art pieces that are very unique and impressive in scale. Um, One standout piece is the steel door from the original vault, and which is thoughtfully preserved. When we actually demolished the building, uh, we made sure that that piece is not really thrown away. We kept it and then integrated into the design. So our client commissioned a local graffiti artist to make an art piece out of that vault door, and now it's prominently displayed at the end of the lobby hallway. And walking through the lobby, you also notice the beautifully preserved terrazzo floor, which adds a sense of a history to the space. And I think the lobby feels like a boutique hotel and offering a really elevated design experience while showcasing really the subtle nods to the building's history and heritage. And then the residents collect their mail from a nicely designed a mail room, and then go to the elevator. And upon arriving at your unit, you're reminded of the building's unique past through looking at those flared columns and exposed concrete ceilings. And also, the 16-foot high ceilings and loft spaces are really rare features that you really don't see and these days. And for residents living on the northern end, which is new wing of the building, there also is a secondary lobby. This secondary lobby also maintains the same similar ambiance as the main lobby, with the carefully selected furniture, art pieces, and whatnot, and also conveniently located so that you have the direct covered entry, I'd say, to the Target store. And at the top of the building, on the sixth floor, residents can enjoy a suite of amenities, including outdoor swimming pool with amazing views, rounding out the exceptional living experience of the Six Corners Lofts.
People swim outside in Chicago?
Only probably a few months.
Yeah. I mean, it gets
You know,
pretty warm there in the summer.
I've designed and actually built a project in Calgary, which you might think it's even worse than Chicago, but they do enjoy a few months of outdoor swimming season.
More power to them. So we know that the Target store is the anchor for the ground floor. What are some of the other retail spaces?
Um, Target is the anchor, but uh, I should add that the neighborhood offers additional retail, including the grocery stores and restaurants, which serves the residents pretty well. And when I back earlier this year when I visited the property, after it was completed, I stopped by a Vietnamese pho restaurant, right next to our lobby, and it was fantastic. Um, Having such amenities within really the near vicinity and walking distance of the property is really what urban living is all about. And then project like ours really adds the richness through providing density, essentially uh, creating a much more lively environment for the retail as well as people in the neighborhood.
I can only imagine that I have to get in a car to do anything.
Right.
I mean, we have one small little retail thing down at the bottom of my hill that you can walk down to, but it doesn't have much.
Mm.
A couple of small burger joint, a pizza joint. Um, but I've always wondered whether I wanted to try urban living one of these days. Now that the kids are grown and gone, where I can just walk to everything and not have to get in a car every time I need something. So I imagine that's beneficial, especially with as dense as Chicago. What part of Chicago is this in?
That's a little, I'd say 30 minutes of northwest direction of Chicago. Maybe less than
Okay.
30 minutes, yeah, of driving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that could be 5 blocks in Chicago at the right time of day.
I totally agree with you that that traffic in Chicago during the rush hour is pretty well known.
I know I've sat in it. It's a lot of fun. That was sarcasm. So you talked about this amenity, a host of amenity spaces, and we talked about the pool. What other amenity spaces are available? I might be wanting to go live here. So what else is available to me in this building?
So, with more than 200 units, the building needed the variety of common areas where residents could work, meet, relax without really feeling crowded. So amenities are spread throughout the property, with the sixth floor rooftop standing out as a really the highlight, offering the stunning views all around, both indoors and outdoors. Um, Property features two lobby spaces, inviting lobby spaces that I mentioned, and well equipped fitness center, rooftop terrace, dog run, dog wash stations, bike storage, covered parking, gaming tables, and uh, a party room with a kitchenette. So list goes so on and so forth. It's too many to really enjoy, but the people are really not really feeling crowded is the key element that we actually thought of when we're designing. And this rooftop um, amenity offers really the expansive views in every direction, making Six Corner Lofts a standout in the area. And in my opinion, there's no competition for this level of amenity offerings in this neighborhood. Um, you typically find uh, this type of amenity in luxury condo buildings or luxury apartment buildings in downtown Chicago. Um, Now, I used to live in a multifamily high-rise condo building that's over 200 units and in an urban area over 10 years, and I can really say that I used every single amenity in the building offered. And these spaces are really critical from a community's perspective, because they do really foster social interactions. And there where you get to know your neighbors, make new friends, find babysitter within the building, and host birthday parties. As an architect, I really love what I do because of this social aspect of what we create for the community and for the neighborhoods.
Well, and it's been a lot of years since I lived in an apartment, but that can feel very isolating because,
Mm,
a lot of, when I was younger, I was not living in a luxury apartment building. I was a young, poor person. Um, and without those amenity spaces, you really don't have any way to get to know your neighbors like you do in a house.
that is
And
true. Hmm.
you're outside playing in the yard with your kids, and you see the neighbors outside with their kids, and you meet people. You don't have that in an apartment building without it. And my youngest son just moved back from Boston. Back, as a matter of fact, he's in Seattle. Just moved back. He's living in Seattle, um, and he's been in Boston. And they had a building that had a lot of those types, and I'd never seen one like that before. They had the dog run in this whole big courtyard area, great rooftop amenity space with big, huge barbecues up there and a kitchen,
Hmm.
and this big common room with coffee. And I was just like, okay, this is the way apartment living should be. Or if you're going to live in, a building where a bunch of people are living in the same building. And it was a completely different experience every time I went to stay with him
Hmm.
than what apartment living of old felt like. So
Right.
it is, I'm seeing more and more of that in mixed use and multifamily housing projects. I think they finally figured it out.
Yeah, it is. This is a big trend, and that's what's attracting younger tenants, even older tenants too. If I'm old, I'd much rather go to an apartment building that has this kind of amenity spaces where people are out there, so that I can watch kids, and dogs, or people interact. So it's much more uh, engaging than living in a more secluded building that doesn't really have uh, these suite of amenities where people actually can gather.
Well, you make a good point about kids. If you have kids living in one of these buildings, you're not going to let your kid go down 10 stories or 4 stories or whatever and go play on the street.
Hmm.
Because you're living in the middle of the city, you need those spaces to
Right.
effectively and safely
Right.
have your kids have outdoor space, and
Hmm.
where you can supervise them and maybe still get something else done in the process. um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way. So I'm in love with that pool deck. I am totally in love with that pool deck. Not in Chicago. If we could just move that to Portland. uh, what kinds of I've asked this question before because it always amazes me. I know how much water weighs, and so when you put a pool up high, what kinds of things did you have to think about when you were putting in this pool, especially in an older building? Like, did you have to do any extra things to the structure, or were the bones strong enough to handle it?
Essentially, the bone was really strong. So that was a key element that led us to the decision of adding a floor as well as a rooftop pool on top of the building. So the the building itself, the concrete, the early 1900s building was really strong. We added few steel pieces to support that right underneath the pool, but that's really minor as opposed to really you'd have to re-engineer the entire area of that underneath the pool. So I'd say it was a fortunate, we were fortunate to have that concrete structure. Um, and, and I'd say the structural calculations and the engineering is important, but also the other side of it is that you have to design a pool in a way that is residents really truly can enjoy, and people enjoy the pool rooftop very differently. And some people are, I'd say swimmers and who loves being in the water. There are sunbathers who loves chaise lounges. I'm one of them, and trade seekers and who loves cabanas, and we provide cabanas. And then people who love socialize, we provide grills and outdoor seatings and dining tables in the design, and really created a community hub up there. So when I visited there, it was, and I felt to myself like I want to live here. It's fantastic.
Well, you make a very good point there. I mean, I know that every architect I've ever met, and that's been quite a few these days, they think about the users, obviously, when they're designing a building, but I do a lot of traveling and speaking and teaching. And so I stay in a lot of hotels or different places, and I can't even count how many times I sat out in some amenity space going, who designed this? This is like, did they even think about the people that come and want to hang out here, and how they use that space? And I kind of really applaud you kind of highlighting, okay, there's different types of hang out by the pool people. I'm also the sunbather, go get my feet wet once in a while, and
Hmm.
have a place I can make a cocktail. Um, but really thinking about it, drilling down to that detail, makes or breaks, I think, what you end up with in the long run. And whether I've been, especially pools, because I love to hang out by the pool, and I've been out by a pool, and it's like it's not a warm, and I don't mean warm heat. It's not an inviting place to be.
Right.
It's just a bunch of concrete, a big tub of water, and some uncomfortable, deck chairs, and, no anything else. There are things you need when you're by the pool. Um,
Right.
so I really appreciate it that you really thought about that, like how different people hang out by the pool, because it sounds like you have a place that will be inviting and welcoming for anybody that's there,
Hmm. And
regardless of what their
that's
thing is.
yeah, that's where thoughtful design and also budget helps totally, because sometimes you run out of money too, and then you just ended up putting a certain function just for functionality purposes, not necessarily looking at creating the entire ambiance that's
Yeah.
can be used well. So sometimes there's a challenge, but it's more or less a thoughtful design side. really, because even with the strained budget, you can create a meaningful space.
I couldn't agree more. And in some of the places I've been where you're you're out there going, I just don't even really want to be here.
Yeah,
It's not an enjoyable experience. If the budget was the issue in those places, which is not your place, um, I think they would have been better off just leaving it out.
I agree.
And it
Hmm.
never fails when I'm at a hotel with one of those kinds of spaces.
Right.
Nobody's out there. There's
Exactly. It's a,
there's a reason, unless it's 110 degrees, nobody's out there.
it's a wasted
There's
space.
Yeah, exactly. You could have done something that would have been
Hmm.
more beneficial to the hotel and I think that's a good piece of advice too in designing a project. I mean,
Absolutely.
again, you can do some really amazing things on a tight budget.
Hmm.
But if you can't afford to do enough to make it what it's supposed to be,
Hmm.
an inviting place that people want to participate in, then maybe think about leaving it out.
Hmm. I mean, that's what architects are supposed to do, right? The
Right.
designers recommend to clients or community, the users, that uh, maybe not,
Yeah.
maybe we redirect it into different ways, different things. So that's where the creativity comes in, working within the budget and all the things that we love to do as architects.
Yeah, I know what everybody wishes they could do. All I keep picturing with this project is what the specifications must have been huge. I'm like, as you're talking, I'm going, yeah, I've written that section. I've written that section. I've written that section. And then all the services and the pool consultant, all the different people, they must have been ginormous.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things that really stood out to me, because I'm kind of fond of the industrial look. I've got a little bit of that going on at home. Um, Tell me a little bit about the different units and what makes them unique.
Um, so the industrial look of the building primarily comes from the exposed concrete structural elements that run throughout the building and extend into each unit. And one of the standout feature is the mushroom or flared capital columns. And those columns, with their wider tops, provide a greater surface area to transfer loads, which in turn allows for thinner slabs. And this flat exposed concrete slab design was really the hallmark of the construction during the early to mid 20th century, particularly I'd say 1910s through 1940s. And at the time, it was really innovative and sustainable method that really reduced the amount of concrete that you use, while creating a large open space. An approach that was an ideal, I'd say, for commercial as well as industrial use back then. And even today, it actually stands. It remains really desirable to have a large open span space. And also the window mountain division, with that mimics the glass block pattern, contributes to the aesthetic of the industrial look. And also, designing around the existing structure naturally leads to many unit types and unique layouts. And I think these irregularities actually enhance the building's charm and give residents a tangible connection to the past and the history. And outside of the units, exposed conduits and pipes in the corridor ceiling also adds another layer to the industrial character, which creates a really cohesive um, a design through whether you're inside of the unit, outside of the unit, exterior, whether you're walking around the building. What really validated our approach was the market's response, and people are drawn to buildings with a character, history, and uniqueness, as confirmed by the actual leasing results. During my visit, I learned that the leasing team was already 5 months ahead of their target, which is really great to hear. and as a designer, as a team member who helped to create this great building.
Well, unlike bell bottoms, I am really happy that this kind of industrial, I mean, we're seeing people do new buildings with that look, let alone restoring. But I love what people are doing with the older buildings. And I
Uh-huh.
don't know what it is, but I'm just very attracted to that. And I think that it's a personality. I don't want to sit inside a square box of a room.
Hmm.
Of any kind. I want things to look at, and I want textures, and I want, something that makes it feel like it comes alive. And so I'm not surprised that they're way ahead of the game. I would imagine there are people fighting over some of those units. And I can see how the tenants feel a probably more personal ownership of their space
Yes,
because they are unique. This is mine. Nobody has one like mine, or mine is
absolutely.
different than most. Yeah, I
Hmm.
would definitely, I could definitely see how those units are flying off the shelves. What would you say was your biggest lesson learned from this project that will make you an even better architect on the next adaptive reuse type of project that you do?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I mean, conceptually, I always kind of struggled with the tension between reusing the old and embracing embracing the efficiency of the new. And this project, however, taught me the value of the coexistence of both, and highlighted how the integration of the old and new uh, only really enhance the building that we design and we live in. And what also stood out the most was how people love the juxtaposition of the old and new, just like what you mentioned, and blending the history with the elements, with the modern interventions, including the swimming pool. Either through the materiality and exposed structures, and preserved details, and residents actively choose this project over others because it offered a unique connection to the past, something that many other new buildings will lack. And ultimately, I think this project reaffirmed that the value of adaptive reuse lies not only in the environmental sustainability, but also in the emotional and experiential connections that it really created.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Just some of these buildings right now, there's just this huge surge of adaptive reuse. Really, I had one, I've mentioned this a few times because I loved this. One of my guests called it radical reuse,
Mm,
which is exactly what your project is as well. And so was the one that I was interviewing him about. Uh, but there is a level of personality and emotion involved with taking that and turning it into something. As difficult as these projects are, and they always are, it just feels like day after day of one more challenge after another. You open up a wall and say, oh, didn't know that was in there, you know, but you learn so much from them, I think,
right.
as a professional. Not
Hmm.
just on how to solve all the problems you're going to encounter through any working with any old building, but like you said, reimagining things, rediscovering or discovering for the first time how you can take this old and the new and turn it into this beautiful thing. So
Right.
I think we grow the most from these type of projects.
And we're going to see more and more of these opportunities. And we'd have to, of course, decide whether buildings preservation worthy or not is a kind of a
Right.
separate issue. But as after the pandemic, people are not going back to the office, and I don't want to really get into necessarily an entirely different subject, but we're going to have these building stocks that requires rethinking and reusing before we think of it demolishing and building new ones because it's the right thing to do in terms of sustainability, but at the same time it'll just give us different opportunity to be creative.
Couldn't agree more. Before I get to our standard 2 closing questions, tell me, what is MG2 working on now that I can look forward to calling you about and saying, so you want to come back and tell me about this project?
Okay, so we have 7 mixed-use multifamily projects that are expected to begin or finish construction next year throughout the U.S. and Canada. And one of them is 46-story high-rise condo, office, retail, uh, mixed-use building in a major city. And another is an 8-story, a 300-unit residential apartment building again in an urban situation. And also we have a smaller scale 2-3-story affordable farm workers housing project in a rural area. So this is incredibly exciting time for us, and within a couple of years, we'll see these projects completed and then enjoyed by many residents.
Your firm does some amazing work, because this is not my first interview with MG2.
Mhm.
We had an interview in the Costco project in
Great.
Monterrey. Is that correct? Monterrey, Mexico?
Mexico, yeah, yeah,
Mind-blowing project.
isn't
It's
it?
like, you did what? That's you have your certain interviews that kind of stay at the top of your head, and you have other ones that you might not be as memorable.
Mhm.
And that one was just like, I was in rapt attention the entire interview. What do you mean it's under the park? Talk to me about this. And one of our best performing interviews as well. And I think that's a testament to the work that your firm does.
Oh, thank you.
And
Yeah,
I
it's a.
think you're coming right behind that one.
Thank you. Thanks. It's a striking building. Again, it'll have to the client and architects and community really have to come together to create something like that, because there has to be a will to create a stunning project like that with the park above, right?
Yeah. Well, and the courts and just everything. It was just really
Hmm.
a standout. I just can't even imagine how many firms are running around out there right now trying to copy or mimic what you did on some, because I mean, it's best form of flattery, right? When somebody
Hmm.
wants to be inspired by your work and go try to create their own along those lines. I
Exactly.
imagine there's a few out there. So we always close with 2 questions. The first being a more broad industry question. Because of just the level of adaptive reuse that went on in this building, I wondered, what kind of wisdom can you share with other design professionals to help them be better equipped and better prepared for the process of taking on a building like this? Like, what do you wish somebody told you, or gave you a heads up about before you started on the first one you ever did?
Um, I believe the most important thing is to really embrace the history of the building. Number one, understanding the history. Uh, Dive deep into the building's history, purpose, architectural style, and understanding what makes it significant can inspire a thoughtful design. And number two, consider the context. Reflect on a building's role within an urban fabric and its relationship to the surrounding community, and designs that harmonize the neighbors' characters are more likely to be embraced by the community, and can help often leads to a much smoother approvals process and embraced by the community.
Great advice. Final question, easiest question of the day. That was also sarcasm. I love asking this question. We all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of contribution to make the world a better place. I really, truly hope most people want to make some kind of impact on the people around them. personal or professional, what do you hope your impact will be?
Yeah, this is a hard question. So my impact, uh, well, I hope I can leave a better place, better platform, environment uh, to our next generation that is really based on generosity and humility. And if I can do a small part towards that goal, I'd be super happy. Uh, yeah.
I'm kind of thinking you probably already have.
Thank you. I'm working towards it.
Jill, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk to me about this incredible project. I cannot wait to share it with all of our listeners. I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me about it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story. And it was great to be with you.
Well, thank you. And I know where to find you now. So just so you know that, you may be getting an email. So, what are you working on? You need to come back and talk to me.
I'll be happy to do
All
that.
right. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Cherise.